Hello, welcome to another episode of the Making History podcast. Once again, my name is Brian.
And I'm Katie.
And we are the Hesses. And we're really excited for this episode. We're going to continue talking about choices, and we're going to talk about consequences, and we're going to talk about just more of the nature of freedom and obedience. But before we get into that, Katie, how are you doing?
Doing well. Yeah, it's been a pretty good week.
Yeah,
I think.
It has been a good week.
We've done 1.5 million things, but
yeah.
What were they?
Good news for us. So this is a longer story than I will tell right now, but we bought a new SUV a couple months ago, and it was not in the condition that we were under the impression that it was in, and it's taken a lot of time and work to get it to where we need it to be. But as of yesterday, we got it back.
Woo. Hallelujah.
Yeah, it's been very annoying.
So long.
Yeah.
Just so long of a process that
we
were not expecting.
No, it was in the shop for 3 months.
Yeah.
And the reason it took so long was that one of the parts in particular that was needing to be replaced was just on back order, like national back order from Honda. And it wasn't a part you could like run to AutoZone. It was like a major component.
Big deal. Yeah.
But yeah, we got it all sorted out. So
yeah,
we're nearly there.
We're going to get to drive it soon. It's going to be great.
Yeah. Thankfully before baby Ollie comes.
Right. Because we bought this car so that we would have room to have 3 car seats.
Right. 3 rows.
Because we are in which, Nora can be in a big girl booster seat now, but
yeah,
you can't fit 3 of those now with how gigantic they are in one row of a car. So we need 3 rows.
Yep. And we got it.
Moving up in the world.
So that's exciting.
Yes. It's finally in our driveway.
Yeah. The girls, so we homeschool and we have the girls in a co-op and they meet once a week on Fridays. And they finished on the first Friday of May. Is that right?
Yes.
So.
Or was it like April 29th?
It might have been the last Friday of April.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that was the case, and I wasn't prepared for that because it's nice to have at least that one day where the girls are in school. So, yeah, we've had them here, and this is the time we use to work on creative stuff. Like right now we're recording a podcast, and it's Friday afternoon, and the girls are upstairs.
Yep.
Izzy's watching Winnie the Pooh. Nora's playing Xbox.
Woohoo.
Lego Fortnite.
There we go.
Yep.
It's their things. That's going to be the routine for a little bit, I suppose.
Yeah.
Until we find something else.
I'm sure they're not exactly upset about what they're getting to do while we do this.
Yeah, I think getting to watch a movie on a Friday afternoon isn't the worst thing in the world.
Just fun. Yep. All right. Well, let's jump in. So a little bit of a recap. And if for some reason this is the first episode you've listened to on our podcast, we are picking up where we've left off on previous conversations. So it would benefit you to go back to the first one and start from the beginning because we are kind of teaching somewhat systematically and progressively through just the thought process that we have. But we are talking about the freedom that people are born into, the freedom to make a choice, and the necessity of that freedom if we're going to cultivate healthy relationships that which require love, they require trust. With kids, we value obedience, honor. All of those things cannot exist in the absence of freedom.
Right.
So we're born into freedom, and it's helping kids navigate that freedom and teach them the value of making good choices. So we've been talking about consequences. Let's talk about, there are 3 types of consequences. There are natural, there are logical, and there are illogical.
Yep.
So let's talk a little bit about those.
Sure. When do you want to start with?
Let's start with natural.
Okay.
Give us an example of a natural consequence of a choice that somebody could make.
Sure. So we have some pretty relevant ones in the house that happen almost every day with Izzy. So a natural consequence for her that she deals with almost every night is whether she wants to eat her dinner or not, or that's her choice, whether she wants to eat her dinner or not. And we can let her know as a natural consequence, if you do not eat your dinner, you're going to be really hungry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a natural consequence of choosing not to eat your meal is that you will be hungry.
Right.
Yeah.
And as her parents, we are more than happy to let her make that choice.
Yeah.
If you don't want to eat your dinner, you want to go to bed hungry, no problem.
Yep.
And if you don't like that, I have a solution. Eat your dinner.
Eat your dinner.
But that's I'm going to leave that ball
easy.
in your court. I'm not going to tell you have to eat dinner.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned this in one of the previous episodes, but this concept or this idea that parents have that it is their responsibility to make their kids do something,
Yeah.
to make their kids do what they want,
Right.
is the antithesis of everything that we are created for.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's not our job to make our kids obedient. It is our job to model honor and respect and love
Right.
and trust, and to teach them the value of choosing obedience.
Right. And giving them all the opportunities
Yeah.
to make those choices.
Yeah.
Because if we don't ever give them the ability to choose themselves, they'll never learn.
Right.
And so once they're, if we do a good job of making them do what we want while they're in our home, once they leave, they're going to be like, oh,
Right.
how do I can't make a choice on my own because I've always just been
Yeah.
told what to do. And
Yeah.
that's scary to think
is.
about, sending a child out into the world without having the ability to make a choice
Yeah. And that happens all the time
all the time.
because parents unfortunately have that mindset that it's our responsibility to control our kids and to make them make the right choices.
Yep.
Well, when they grow up and they move out of the house and there's nobody there to force them to make a right choice, they're stuck in a
Yep.
state of irresponsibility
Yeah.
and indecisiveness. And even if they do decide, what they're going to do, they probably don't have the skills to know whether or not the choice they're going to make is the right choice.
Right.
Is it a good choice? What
Yeah.
consequences are going to come? Because they never had to experience that.
Right. They don't even have the ability to think through what could possibly come on the other end of that choice.
Right.
It's just like, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. And then if it's the wrong choice, they get slammed with the consequences out of nowhere.
Right.
That's what it feels like to them. And I'm speaking from experience here, not
Yeah.
that I think I was, taught to make my own choices to a certain extent, but not necessarily to the point that I was actually confident in making those choices.
Sure.
And I think being the youngest, that kind of happened a little bit naturally of just like, I wasn't necessarily presented with quite as many choices just because I went along with whatever my siblings were doing,
Sure.
or this was just what I saw modeled. And so I made that choice, but I didn't know why. And so once I became an adult and moved out, I was like, well, this is different.
Well, for a lot of kids, the reason they go crazy in college is because that's the first time they ever felt free in their life.
Yeah.
That's the first time they've actually been out under the oppressive rule of parents who think they're doing their kids favors by forcing them to make a good choice and
Right.
eliminating the potential for bad choices,
Yeah.
because that potential never goes away. So kids get to college and for the first time in their life, they feel free to do what they want and make the
Yep.
choices they want. And surprise, surprise, it usually doesn't go well.
Ew. No, it does not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lesson that everybody has to learn, and we just prefer that our kids learn that lesson as early as possible.
Right. Yes.
So that way when they get older and they move out and they're not being parented by us
Yeah.
necessarily.
Right.
They grow up and they move out and they go into the world fully equipped to have vision for the future they want to build and the people they want to become,
Yeah.
and the ability and capacity to make choices that will lead to the realization of that vision.
Right. And that's not to say that they're not going to make some bad choices.
Yeah.
Like, you can set your kids up as best as you can. And still,
Yeah.
as humans, they're going to go out in the world and make a few wrong choices and
Yep.
experience the consequences. But when they have that ability to think through why they're making the choice that they make, the consequences, good and bad on both sides, when they have that ability to think through it, they're able to take responsibility for the choices that they make rather than become
Right.
fall victim immediately to oh, this happened and I don't know why?
Yeah. And everything's everybody else's fault.
Yeah.
Yeah. That is the cycle of irresponsibility. People who don't understand that they're responsible for what they do and for the consequences that come of their actions, they have a tendency to blame everybody else. And I think we talked about that.
I think so.
But
Yeah.
that's classic irresponsibility.
Yep.
And we want to get that as far away from our family as possible.
No, thank you. for
No,
that.
thank you. No,
Well, we got off on a little bit of a tangent there, talking about natural consequences. But
I know we did.
staring back, another example of a natural consequence could be if you are in a job, if you have a job, and you decide that you are not going to go
Yeah.
to your job anymore. You're just not going to show up. A natural consequence of not showing up is that you're going to lose your job.
Yeah.
You may get, a little bit of grace from your boss for, a couple times, but if you just keep not showing up, you're going to be unemployed.
Yeah. And that's the natural consequence of an action.
Yep.
Yeah. You don't go to work, or you go to work, but you don't do your job, and you won't have one there after a little while. And that's the way it goes. And that's the way it should go.
Exactly.
But with kids, there are times where there are natural consequences that we can allow them to experience and let them kind of learn
Yeah.
very naturally. But then there are times where it's our responsibility to impose a consequence.
Right.
If there may be a natural consequence, but it may not be one that they are able to register. So we'll think about, so Nora's upstairs right now playing Lego Fortnite on the Xbox.
Yep.
Super fun. She loves it. When it's time for her to turn it off, she knows at this point, because she's 6 and we've trained her, she knows that the way she responds or reacts to the news that it's time to turn it off will determine the outcome of, it'll determine the outcome of how the rest of the day goes, how tomorrow goes. She has the ability or the freedom to throw the controller if she wants to.
Sure.
I'm not going to tell her that she can't because she could.
She could. Yeah. She has the physical ability to throw it.
I could tell you can't throw the remote. You can't throw the controller, but it's just not true.
Yeah.
And she can prove that it's not true.
Oh, yeah.
Right? For any parent who's ever tried to tell their kid they can't throw a tantrum, that doesn't work.
Right.
Because they
How'd that
can
go
throw
for
a
you?
tantrum. They absolutely can.
Yep.
You don't like it. You don't want them to. No. But you don't have the ability to take that freedom away from them because they can throw a tantrum.
Yep.
So Nora could throw the controller. Let's say the controller breaks. She, in her head, she may not fully register, and in that moment, that the next time she wants to play Lego Fortnite, she won't be able to because the controller doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. We've got the one. So
Yeah, we have one. So she could do that. And if she were to do that, surprise, surprise, guess who's not going to run out and buy another one right away?
Yeah.
It's going to be, if that were to happen. Now, this is extreme.
Oh, yeah.
We've taught her, we've trained that kind of behavior out of her. So
typically the worst that we get now is like, oh,
yeah, yeah, like a little bit of attitude.
Mom, Dad. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not done yet.
Yeah. So there could be if she were to go so far as to break the controller, there would be the natural consequence of, well, it doesn't work anymore. So it's not even up to me right now whether or not you can play, because you just can't, because it doesn't work anymore. But let's say it's not that extreme, but she does just have an attitude.
Yeah.
And, she throws a bit of a tantrum, however that looks. She just has an attitude. She becomes disrespectful. The logical consequence would be that, well, next time we're not going to play. Tomorrow we're just not going to play at all.
Right.
And that is a very logical consequence because it's related to the thing she was doing.
Right. It's directly connected to the bad behavior or the less than great behavior.
Right.
And then affects, what's something that she wants to do.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe you should have thought of that before you had
Right.
attitude.
And then we've had that conversation where she's done something like that. And then we're like, well, we're not going to play tomorrow because this wasn't a good response. But the next time you get to play, you get to try this again. And you get to decide for yourself how this is going to go.
Yep.
You are fully in control of yourself. You can turn it off calmly and respectfully. and you'll get to play the next time, or you could not and you won't.
Yep. And depending, like, there have been times where, she was probably just tired or really like had a picture in her head of what she wanted to accomplish
Yeah.
during that time of playing.
Right.
And she had a little bit more of an extreme reaction. And so as a parent or as parents, we had the right to like determine the severity of the consequence. So instead of, or turning from one day of not playing into 3 days or a whole week. So, logical consequences can, it's based on the situation that you can determine what is going to come after.
Yes. It's relevant to the situation. Now, an illogical consequence would be if she has a bad attitude about turning the Xbox off and we spank her. And the consequence is that I'm spanking you. But the next time you get to play, the next time you want to play, you get to.
Yeah.
To me, that is completely illogical.
Right.
And that is not helping her make the connection between the choice she made and the outcome of that choice.
Right.
But the consequence is, if it's relevant, it will help them make the connection between the choice they made and the outcome. There's a book, and I actually can't remember the name of the book. I bought it just because there was one specific chapter I wanted to read.
Okay.
And I know the author is Jack Canfield. It's something like The Success Principles, but he has this chapter about responsibility. And he has this equation where he talks about it's E plus R equals O. So the E is event plus R response equals outcome.
Okay.
And so every event that you face in your life, the outcome of that event is going to be shaped by your response to it.
That's good. Yeah.
And it's just a way of understanding our role in the direction our lives go and the responsibility that we have. Now, let's actually talk briefly about responsibility.
Okay.
And this may be something we circle back to and do a whole episode on because there's
Sure.
a lot to say about it. But the responsibility, or the word responsibility broken down, is responsibility. So if I am going to become a person who even has the ability to respond to the events and the circumstances of my life, I have to become a person who takes full responsibility for the way I act, for the choices I make, and the consequences that come.
Yeah.
And if I'm not a person who's willing to do that, and I'm an irresponsible person, I don't have the ability to respond. And all that leaves me with is the ability to react. And reactions are very different from responses.
Very. Yeah.
Reactions require no intentionality,
Yep.
no thought. It's just an emotional, like instinctive reaction
Yep.
to what I'm feeling in that moment.
Yep. You have no time to think like, okay, this just happened. What am I going to do about it? You just do it. And
Yeah.
it's almost like you have, it is like you have zero control.
Yeah, it's a thoughtless reaction is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
You take no time to own the action that just came out of you.
Right.
It's just there all of a sudden.
Yeah. And if I'm an irresponsible person, not only will I not take responsibility for what I just did or what I just said, but I'll find a way for it to be your fault.
Oh yeah. Yep. Well, you did this.
Right.
So
I'm not responsible.
right. That's
what's
why I
happening here.
acted that way.
Right.
Yeah.
It's your fault. And parents get caught in this cycle too of creating an environment where they need their kids to act a certain way so that they can act a certain way.
Yeah.
Because an irresponsible parent needs a kid to behave well for them to behave well. Because irresponsible parents, or just irresponsible people, like you said, they don't know how to control themselves.
Right.
So they need other people to behave a certain way. And if they don't, then I can't be kind unless you're obedient.
Yeah.
And if you're disobedient, I'm unkind, but it's your fault because you were disobedient.
Yeah. Which is such a scary reality to be living in. Like thinking about that is just like, oh, that sounds so awful to have that dynamic in a home.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, like, your peace is just going to be completely gone. Because even in the times that, like, your kids are behaving or the people around you are being kind, even in those times, I feel like it would constantly be in the back of your mind, like, oh, I hope nothing goes wrong, because then what am I going to do? And you just have no ability to be like a decent human.
Yeah. Well, and what happens is your kids' emotional reactions become your emotional reactions because you don't know how to stay calm in the midst of like tense, escalated emotions.
Right. I guess we have, I mean, you know, we all have moments of that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, even the other night, I had a moment of kind of losing it.
Sure.
During bedtime.
Yeah.
With Izzy. We're just in a phase right now where Izzy is like, she's exploring her, you know, her freedom. Yeah. Exploring. She's 3.
Yeah.
It's completely normal. And she should be doing this.
Right.
But at bedtime, I mean, I know all you parents listening, bedtime can be just, it can be the sweetest time.
Yeah.
And I really love bedtime because the girls are, I feel like that's like really deep connection time. Mm-hmm. So inevitably when they want to spill their hearts out and have very deep conversations, it's like, I'm falling asleep. Can we talk about this tomorrow?
Yeah.
But anyways, it can be so sweet, but it can also be very frustrating with little kids, especially because it's the, you know, the classic, oh, I'm thirsty. I need to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
I need to ask you one more question.
Yeah.
I need this stuffed animal. I need this blanket, but I want to sleep over here. And it's just like all the options come out. The other night, Izzy was like just really pushing my buttons. And I was home. You were out. And so it was just me at home. And the girls wanted to try sleeping in the same room. And I was like, great, sure, we can do that. It went great at first. They were like super cooperative. And I was like, oh, this is going to be a piece of cake. This is going to be great. And then after a few minutes of them being upstairs by themselves, I had already gone downstairs, started to read, was in my unwinding time. And Izzy just would not leave Nora alone. Yeah. She would like roll over and just start like poking her or like trying to lay on her pillow, hitting her with the stuffed animal. You know, she was just being playful. She wasn't being bad. Right. She was just being playful. But, you know, a couple of times I went up there and I was like, hey, it's time to lay down and leave each other alone and go to sleep. And then, of course, you know, Nora, our rule follower, was like, Izzy, it's time to go to sleep. And was like very serious. Like, cut it out. And then the combination of Nora being a little harsh with Izzy and Izzy just wanting to do what she wants to do. Right. It's just always a dangerous combo because then Izzy gets even more like, well, I'm going to show you now what being bothered is. Right. And so fast forward. Eventually, I moved the girls into their own rooms because it just wasn't working. They weren't going to sleep. And it had been over an hour. And so I was like, okay, we're just going to sleep in our own rooms. And even after that, Izzy was like getting up and she's sleeping on the floor right now because that's what she wants to do. So great. But she kept piling her animals over onto like where she was sleeping. And I was like, we know that she does not sleep well that way. Yeah. And so I went up there and I was like, hey, we're not going to do that anymore. And she wasn't listening and she kept putting it on the bed. And I was like, Izzy. And so after a long like back and forth, I just lost it. And I was like, cut it out, go to sleep. We're done. And then, you know, that just set her off. And it was just from there, it just erupted. Yeah. And, you know, eventually she did go to sleep, but it was like an MMA fight before, you know, it actually accomplished. And I realized when I got back downstairs, I was like, okay, first of all, I did not handle that well. What went wrong? Yeah. And so I kind of analyzed the situation and I realized she was really not doing anything that was inherently wrong. She was just, you know, piling animals up. She wanted to sleep on top of the animals, but I didn't want her to do that. Right. And so I took it upon myself to try and make her do what I wanted her to do when what she was doing wasn't really wrong or bad. But I allowed my responsibility to go out the window in that process. And I just ended up like in the heat of the moment, like reacting
Yep.
and just we raised our voices with each other, which is typically not something that we do
Right.
in the home. Like I can count on one hand the amount of times that like I have like
Yeah.
yelled
Uh-huh.
or raised my voice, and that was one of them.
Yep.
And so I took ownership, of that, and was able to see that like my responsibility was gone. I was in that moment, I was an irresponsible parent and I was a reactive parent
Yeah.
because I felt out of control and I was tired, and, I can make all these excuses, but inevitably, or when it comes down to it, I stopped controlling myself and
Yep.
allowed her emotion
Yes.
to control me and rule my decision.
Yeah.
So that was a long way of me saying I did not do that well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It really is an art form navigating this.
Yeah.
Especially like the choices thing.
Right.
It's not always easy to analyze the situation and see the clear choices that need to be laid out before them. That's not always easy.
Right.
And like you said, and I love that through analyzing, you came to this conclusion that what she was doing wasn't inherently bad with her like wanting to make a little stuffed animal pile.
Yeah.
It's not what you were wanting her to do.
Right.
But if you, and I think this is hard to do as a parent, but sometimes I think we need to try to get to put ourselves in their position, to try to get inside their little heads
Yeah.
and think, okay, what is it they're actually doing? Is this behavior inherently bad? Or is it just not my preference in this moment?
Right. Is this just inconvenient to me
Right.
right now? And I'm allowing my frustration to take the place of logic.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's easy to get there. But I think that's a really good way of analyzing it and looking at it. And that's
Yeah.
a great question to ask because that will determine like if what she was doing was inherently bad, maybe she was ripping up her books.
Yeah.
Maybe she took some markers and was coloring on the wall. Maybe, whatever.
Right.
There are things that we could very well label as like, this is not good behavior.
Right.
This is not something
This
that,
is destructive. This is causing harm.
yes, this isn't something that we're going to allow. But if it's not that, then I think you have a whole different set of options before you as a
Yes.
parent
Yeah.
for ways to handle that. But yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Get inside your kid's head and think about, because she really is a person who naturally wants to explore her freedom
Yes.
more than Nora.
Yeah. Yep. Nora did like a little bit of that here and there, and it's not to say that she's like a little robot, like,
Yeah.
beep. But Izzy has taken it to a new level
Yeah.
of, I would like to do it my way, please.
Mm-hmm.
And you can just stay out of it.
Yeah. So Nora, I think they're pretty stereotypical first and second
Yeah.
children. So Nora's driven by justice and truth, and she wants to know what the standard is, and she wants to hold herself to that standard. So
Yeah.
when we got Nora her first big girl bed, she turned 3.
Yep.
She turned 3, and her big 3-year-old birthday gift was, here's like a brand new bed. It's a big girl bed.
Yep.
And for the first, I don't know how many months, she never got off that bed
No.
unless she thought that unless she had been given express permission
Yeah.
by us.
Yep.
We never told her that she couldn't get off the bed.
Nope.
That was never even a conversation. But she had grown so accustomed to being in a crib and only coming out of bed when we said it was
got her.
time to,
Yeah.
that she just carried that into her big girl bed.
Yep.
And it was like several months where we'd watch her on the camera, and sometimes she would sit on the edge of the bed and just kind of look out at the room.
Yep.
And like we never said you couldn't get off, but she just had that in her head that this is the expectation that,
It was so ingrained in her. Yeah.
yes. Yep. And she's a rule follower. And then with Izzy, it's totally different.
Yep.
That,
Well, yeah, Nora never even crawled out of her or climbed out of her crib.
Right.
She had never even tried it. I
Yep.
don't think.
Yeah.
Maybe once, and it just didn't
Right.
work. And so she was like, well, I'll just wait for mom and dad.
Yeah.
But Izzy, the instant, like as soon as she could physically do it,
Yeah.
she's out of there. She's
Yeah.
like, I'm going to go. I'm going to run around my room. I'm going
Yes.
to play. Like, this is great.
She wants to explore all the possibilities of what she could do.
Yes. Yep.
And so it's been a learning curve for us, trying to navigate having such different kids.
Yeah.
As anybody with multiple kids
Right.
knows that they're just different and they require different, parenting.
Yep.
Our goals are the same, but
Sure.
sometimes the application of our principles and our values
Yeah.
can look a little bit differently
Yeah.
depending on what they need based on how they're wired.
The application and the effort.
Yeah, sure.
With Izzy, typically it takes a little bit more effort from us. Whereas with Nora, it was like, oh, we asked you this one time
Yeah,
and now you're just doing it forever.
right.
Like, this is just how you know it to be done. And like, we have to give her permission to do things a different way. It's like,
Yes.
oh, well, yeah, you used to have to do that when you were littler, but now that you've grown, like you can
Yeah.
do it this way. And even that sometimes is like, let me go ask dad, like,
Yeah.
let me make sure. Or if you're telling her, it's like, let me go ask mom.
Yeah,
And so she is just like, she has such a high value for doing the right thing. And it's not that Izzy doesn't have a high value for doing the right thing. Like you said, she just wants to know all the possibilities of what she could possibly do.
yeah.
Yeah.
She's more interested in exploring the landscape of boundaries.
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
what she wants to know.
Yep. Is this okay?
Yeah.
If I go over here and I climb on this, is this okay?
And it's not inherently bad.
No.
It's not. She's wired to explore her freedom. And our job as parents is to help her understand where the boundaries lie.
Yeah.
And if she wants to cross over that boundary, there will be consequences, but she's free to do that. The beauty of consequences is that it is one of the best teachers that we have.
Yeah.
Because in the absence of consequences, we'll never know whether or not the choice we're making is going to have any kind of effect on
Right.
us or the people around us. So for some parents, it may feel kind to withhold consequences from your kid
Yeah.
because it's not fun to see them experience the hardship of
Right.
having made a bad choice and experience a consequence. But it's the kindest thing you can do for them
Right.
because you're teaching them the reality of how life works.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think consequences too come with such a stigma that I wish would just go away. Because even like for me, even like when we're living this out every single day, and I know this, I immediately jump to consequences being a negative thing when actually they can be good
Yeah.
as well too. Like a good consequence of having like a gentle and sweet response. We'll go back to the example you were using earlier of like turning off the Xbox for Nora.
Yeah.
Like when she has a good response to us saying, hey, it's time to be done. Her consequence is that she gets to play again
Yeah.
if there's time and if the day allows it.
Yep.
And so like, I think we just need to lose the mindset that consequences are always negative
Right. That's good.
and know that like, and even like not bringing the bad consequences in to label them as good things, but just shifting our mindset of even when it is a negative consequence, when it's something that like is being taken away or whatever the consequence looks like, that is still, like you said, a kindness to our kids because we're teaching them, hey, like when you make this choice, this is a lesser choice
Yeah.
than what this would have been. Like your day is not going to be quite as fun because you made this choice. And then hopefully, the next time or the next time or the next time, maybe it takes a few times for it to register in their brains, which
Yeah.
is okay and
Yeah.
normal. Then they'll realize, oh, okay, this is a better choice for me to make. And that's helping them build that skill and the association between bad choices and bad consequences and good choices and good consequences.
Right. Yeah. I think it's helpful as parents. And I think this would be a good next episode. It's helpful as parents to keep two things in mind. The first is that our kids are immature and they are not born with the skills or capacity to understand how their internals work,
Right.
their thoughts and their feelings and their needs and their desires. They're not born by default with an understanding of how those work and how those affect the way we act and the way we behave.
Right. Yeah.
So on one hand, all they really know how to do is to act on their emotions. So we need to hold that truth in tension with the other truth that they may not have been born with the capacity to act like mature people, but they do have the capacity to be trained in the way of maturity.
Yes.
And so it's holding those two truths in tension with each other, that they don't have that capacity to be that way without being trained, but they do have the capacity to be trained.
Right. Yeah. They're not like, they are able to grasp that concept from a much earlier age than I think we give them credit for a lot of times, where I think a lot of parents and, what I have seen sometimes is that they won't give their kid consequences because it's like, well, they're not old enough to get it yet.
Right.
And it's like, your kid's 4.
Yeah.
They are. They're old enough to get it.
Honestly,
it's past time. You're coming to the point where you've almost missed it.
Right.
Actually, that foundational first 5 years.
Yeah.
Like time to, lay some foundation here.
Yeah.
And that is the easier in the moment option.
Sure.
That is the passive option that it's like, I don't really want to deal with that right now. So I'm just going to say my kid can't handle it.
Right.
When actually your kid can for sure handle it.
Yeah.
You're actually the one as a parent who's not willing to handle it right now.
Right.
So that's a fun reality to face.
Yeah.
Is your kid not ready, or are you just being too lazy?
Yeah. A lot of times I wonder if parents just have an aversion to conflict, and correction feels like conflict.
Yeah.
And so you're right. A lot of times it's easier to assume that they don't understand the nature of the choices they make, and they're not able to make the connection between their choices and the consequences that come.
Right.
You and I have had a tendency to go far the other way, the other side of the pendulum, to assume that our kids are really smart.
Yeah.
That they are highly capable of understanding. And if we find that they're actually not able to understand and comprehend, then we'll pull it back a little bit.
Sure.
And we'll find where they're at, because the goal is to meet them where they're at.
Right.
I don't want to assume less of them and find out later that they could have understood far more than I gave them the opportunity to. I would rather push the limits of their capacity to understand and scale back if needed.
Right. Yeah. They're going, like, people, not just kids, but even as adults, like, we rise to the standards that we're held.
Sure.
And, if you are a very driven and disciplined person, you will exceed those standards in most cases. But a lot of times people will rise to the standard that they are being held at and not attempt to go any higher than that. So if we are keeping our kids down here, why would they even make the effort to go up here?
Sure.
But if we hold them to a standard up here, you might be shocked that they're going to rise up to that standard. And if they genuinely are not, like, actually mentally and physically able to rise up to that standard, then, like you said, that's when you can make adjustments. But it's always better to assume more of your kids in those ways and then have the grace to come down if you need to, rather than being disappointed or frustrated when they don't come to that level of, holding them accountable or expecting them to understand things. But having the grace to be like, okay, I didn't read this right. We'll come back down here and meet eye to eye at this level. Yeah. And then work together to keep going.
Yeah. All right. Good.
Great.
I think that's probably enough for this episode.
Covered a lot of ground.
We did. We covered a lot of ground.
Do you want to do just a super quick recap of the 3 different types of consequences, just to kind of tie it all together?
Yep, that's good. So the 3 types of consequences are natural, and that's not something that another person needs to impose upon somebody. That, in the example we gave of, if you don't eat your dinner, you'll be hungry. Right. And that seems like a you problem. I'm not making you hungry. I'm not making you not eat your dinner. I'm not going to make you eat your dinner either. If you don't want to be hungry, eat. If you're okay being hungry, great, go for it. Eventually you're going to get hungry enough to eat, so I'll see you then, So there's the natural consequence. Then there's the logical consequence. And that is something that is imposed upon the kid by their parent. And it relates directly to the situation at hand.
Yes.
So we'll use one more quick example. One night, Nora was staying up later than she was permitted to reading. And it's hard because, like, she's reading. Are you kidding me? So, like...
How do you tell kids stop reading so many books?
I know, right? But there does come a point where it's too much and you're staying up too late. You need to go to bed.
Yep.
So one night, we found out that she was up later. And she tried to self-impose the consequence that because she stayed up too late reading, later than we asked her to, that she wouldn't play Fortnite for a couple days.
Yeah.
And then you had the wisdom to say, well, that has nothing to do with what's happening here. So tomorrow night, you won't get to read any books after we do our bedtime stuff. We'll do the Bible and we'll pray and we'll go through our routine. And then after that, no books. You can just lay there, you know? And she took that much harder.
She did. She did not like that.
She took that much harder.
Yeah.
But again, in that moment, you were trying to help her make the connection of the choice she made.
Yes.
And the consequences that will come. And you found one that is logical, that it made sense. And we'll go back to like having a job.
Yeah.
Let's say Nora's 16 and she gets her first job and she decides one day she doesn't want to go. She wants to go to the mall with her friends or whatever kids will do at that time.
Right. Maybe malls won't exist.
Maybe they won't exist. I don't know. But if she decides that she doesn't want to go to work, her boss is going to tell her she doesn't have a job anymore. He's not going to tell her, well, you can't drive your car for a week, or you can't, It's going to be directly related. And so we're trying to help our kids understand how that works. And then there's the illogical consequence.
Yeah.
And that is where we do something, we impose some form of consequence that is completely unrelated to the situation at hand.
Right.
And in doing so, we're not helping them make that connection.
It's like, okay, well, yeah, that's a bummer, but also I'm probably just going to keep doing this thing.
Right.
Because I'm not losing it.
Yeah.
Or nothing is being altered to this like misbehaving over here.
Right.
This misbehavior was not affected at all because now I just like don't get to have a treat, but I get to keep playing Xbox, whatever it is.
Yeah. So yeah, those are the three.
Yep.
And yeah, we'll pick up in the next episode. We'll talk a little bit more about maturity and immaturity and what it means to allow kids to be kids while, as parents, continuing to be parents.
Yeah.
Cool.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. And if you watched, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.